Guys, welcome back to Zim Reads. I am Zim. It's Booker season, and I'm here to review a Booker Prize longlisted novel. Today, we are going to be diving into The Colony by Audrey McGee. I did mention and extol this novel in a previous video on my channel a few weeks ago, and I promised a full review forthcoming, and here is that review. I'm finally getting time to sit down and talk a little bit more about The Colony by Audrey McGee. So, welcome. I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you are tuning in. And I hope that you're enjoying Booker season as much as I am. This year, the list has been very enjoyable. It's been an enjoyable list so far. I've only read 4 of the 13 books, which is only a third of them, a little less than if you do the math. But I have enjoyed each of the books I've read, and I expect to continue enjoying these novels. Some more than others, of course. That's how it goes. Before we get started on my review of The Colony by Audrey McGee, I just want to mention my channel doesn't exist for the purpose of rating books. I read books that I'm enjoying. I read books that whose prose moves me, whose content moves me, whose authors I enjoy, and I enjoy discovering new authors and new types of literature as well. As I've said in previous videos, I was not anyone that was reading any modern literary fiction before I met Kieran from Katie Books and was drawn to the Booker Prize and the community around it. Drew me in. This was about 2 years ago, 2 Booker seasons ago, 2020. And I've really enjoyed the process of diving in. So I like to discover new authors. But I am not here to read everything and rate everything. And I am definitely not going to finish every book that I start, because I don't read for any other purpose than to find pleasure and to be moved. And caveat, does that mean that sometimes I will DNF a book that I may turn out loving if I had just pressed through and finished? Yes, and I have accepted that is going to happen. There are going to be some books that fall through the cracks because of my hastiness at DNFing or not finishing a book that I start. With that said, I can usually tell pretty quickly if I'm going to hate reading a book. Prose is really important to me, and it's not that I'm comparing all the prose out there to the masters. It's just that if the prose does not strike me as writing that I think is worth being published, I'm not going to finish it. I'm not going to continue reading it because it's not going to bring me pleasure, and that's my whole reason for reading. I don't have a lot of time. I am a father and husband. I work a full-time job. I have a house that's over 100 years old. I have a lot of different responsibilities, and I also have a lot of different interests. So reading for me is something I thoroughly enjoy, but I don't do it for any other reason except to fulfill and enrich myself and enjoy the process of it. So if I start reading a book and the prose is striking me as very elementary or lacking in skill or craft, I get it. That is not necessarily fair, because who am I to decide that this book is not worth being read? but ultimately I'm probably going to DNF that book. So, with that said, why am I rambling about all of this? I don't know, really, except I just wanted to put that out there and say, I'm here to read books that move me and that I enjoy reading. And I will DNF a book on a dime if I sense it's not going that direction for me. So, if you're out there and you feel guilty for DNFing books, and so you just press on and keep reading anyway, take heart from my philosophy and have permission to DNF the frickin' books. Like, there's so many books. There are so many books, and you only have so much time. Even if reading is your only hobby, you have no other really big responsibilities, and all you do with all your free time is read, life is so short. We don't know how much time we have, and life is too short, in my opinion, to keep reading books that you're not enjoying. So, there we go. Now let's jump into The Colony. It's been a few weeks since I've read The Colony by Audrey McGee, probably close to a month. And so I'm going to remember things. I can tell you this. It is a book that I have continued to think about since reading it. And as I talk and think more about it, I appreciate and value the book even more. And I really enjoyed it while I read it, and after I read it, I was very impressed. I was really excited to predict that it would be on the long list, and happy to see that it did make the long list. But the more I talk about it with other readers and with other people that have read it, and the more I defend it against the naysayers, etc., the more I appreciate it. And, so there you have it. What is this book about? It's a funny question to even ask. I really don't even like that question. And I know you're sitting there saying, well, why did you ask that question then? Good question. Good question. So, a summary of the book. We have an artist going through kind of a crisis in his marriage as well as in his art career. He's really looking for his magnum opus, I think. And so we start the book out with this artist. His name is Lloyd, and he is taking a boat over to a remote island off of Ireland, off the coast of Ireland. And it is a native Irish-speaking community that is small, and this artist wants an authentic experience, presumably. But he's going over there to paint the cliffs of these islands, is what he tells the people that he encounters first, and he gets over there. And so we begin the story of following Mr. Lloyd, the artist, as he is himself searching for something. Mr. Lloyd serves the novel as a representation of a certain type of cultural exploitation. We'll unpack that a little bit as my ramblings continue. So we have Mr. Lloyd. We subsequently get another visitor to the island who has visited multiple times over the years prior, and he's a linguist from Algeria, I think. It was colonized by France. And I can't even remember his name. Masson, maybe? I can't remember, but he's there presumably out of his passion and commitment to protect the Irish language. But he also serves the novel as another example of cultural exploitation. So we've got Mr. Lloyd the artist, and we've got Masson the linguist, both outsiders from this island. So we've got those two kind of opposing, subtly different representations of cultural exploitation. Now, what am I talking about? Lloyd goes over there to paint the cliffs. He ends up painting the people, even though they asked him not to. But he's there for the summer, and he begins painting the people. And he's looking for something that he can take away in his art to go and, become a famous artist, essentially, and maybe win his wife back and whatever. He's essentially exploiting this culture for the images that it presents. And one of the young men on the island who wants to get away from the culture and into the modern world, who lost his grandfather and his father and his uncle in a boating accident years prior, fishing, and really doesn't see any hope for himself staying on that island except to have a dismal life of fishing, which he does not want to do, and wants to get out. He starts to kind of apprentice under Mr. Lloyd and learn how to paint, and he takes to it exceptionally quick and impresses this professional artist Lloyd with how well he is able to paint and what he sees in the landscapes and the people, and his advice to Mr. Lloyd. And Mr. Lloyd, over the course of the novel, also begins exploiting this young man. Masson is there as a linguist, and he is wanting to protect the culture and the language from any modern influence and impact, and the impact of English on the language. He wants to preserve in amber and preserve in a terrarium this language and this culture. And so much so that he's willing to violate the wishes of the people, like the young man that wants to paint and get off the island, wants to be known by his English name, and Masson will only refer to him by his Irish name, Seamus. And he wants to go by James. So you have this seemingly well-intentioned, subtle dynamics of exploitation, where Mr. Lloyd, you can view it as a good intention. You want to paint this landscape and paint these people and go show them to the world so that they can see the beauty of this culture and the beauty of these people. On the other hand, Masson, who his seeming good intentions are to protect this culture and protect this beautiful language that is being infringed upon and absorbed by the modern world and modern language and devices and things like that. So there's seeming to be these layers, these good intentions of these individuals, but the realities that we see and that Audrey McGee gives to us so softly and yet so explosively are these elements of exploitation. The good intentions are the masks for the actual, which is exploiting these people for your own academic pursuit, artistic pursuit, etc. So it's very interesting the way Audrey McGee gives this to us. But on the other hand, you have other layers where James kind of represents, yes, this desire to get out and to escape from this existence that he does not want. So he kind of represents this other subtle reality of sacrificing the cultural dynamics that Masson wants to protect, Lloyd wants to exploit. James is willing to walk away from it all and let it be absorbed by the modern world, etc. Very interesting, all these angles that this culture is under attack from, even from inside. So yeah, all of that going on, the multiple different subtle forms of colonialism or cultural exploitation, cultural sacrifice. Then you have James's mother, who lost her husband and her brother and her father in that drowning of the fishing boat crew. And she wants to stay because of that tragic reason. She wants to stay on the island and not necessarily modernize, but it's not necessarily for any reason that aligns with, maybe what the linguist wants or what her son James wants. She can see the value in entering the modern world for economic reasons, financial reasons, etc. And it's almost like, can the momentum and the swing of that pendulum of cultural absorption really even be stopped and halted the way the linguist wants it to be? What ultimately all these elements kind of weave together to show us, I think, and kind of explore, at the very least explore, are these elements of exploitation, yes, but also these elements of like, who gets to decide the progression and movement and advancement and absorption of a culture? Who gets to choose if that happens or doesn't happen? Is that in the hands of the people that own the culture, the people whose culture and language it is today? Is that in the hands of wiser historians and governmental officials or linguists that recognize this should be preserved and therefore let's create parameters around this to protect it and keep it preserved? I used to live in China teaching English, and I visited a lot of rural China. And in one particular region that had been determined to be a World Heritage Site, which is an official kind of recognition of the fact that there's something unique and special here that should be preserved by this world organization, international organization. There were these beautiful cultures and this beautiful language, and the Chinese government had also kind of put a stamp of approval on the fact that this should be preserved, which, on one hand is a good thing, but on the other hand, the practicals of how that played out essentially kept those people in poverty and kept their children in poverty. And you could see a clear line between the little girls of those villages and the elder women of those villages, and kind of what their future was going to be, which was a future of hard labor, a future of a lot of suffering, really a lot of suffering from my vantage point. But the question has to be grappled with, or at least has no simple answers of how a culture should be managed and handled, a language should be managed and handled. Because while we're talking about something of historical significance, we are also talking about present day living people and the impact it will have on them. And who's absorbing the impact of preserving those languages? Is it good? Is it bad? I don't even know the answers to these questions, but I think why The Colony is so special as a novel is because it explores these questions in a way that doesn't offer an easy answer. It kind of showcases the realities of colonial exploitation, the realities of internal cultural awareness and identification, economics and financial impacts. And I haven't even touched on the sprinkled throughout the narrative on this island in The Colony are these short little paragraph chapters all throughout about killings that are happening due to issues with the Troubles in Ireland and the political dynamics that are playing out at the time that the story is unfolding. And that serves to showcase another impact on the culture. Is you have the different various subtle ways of exploitation. You have the internal pressure to advance and move forward the economic and financial pressure, and then you have the external pressure of the political dynamics that are happening in proximity to this island and these people in this culture. Because of this the complicated nature of the subject matter in this novel, and the way Audrey McGee handles the movement of this story to showcase it in from such a different angle and through such a different prism of light, The Colony is a superb novel. It explores these very challenging conversations and questions without being prescriptive, and does it with beautiful prose, poetic prose, realistic characters. You know, they don't serve as allegorical representations, which I think is a challenging thing to do when you're dealing with such precise, subtle things. Audrey McGee hit a home run with The Colony. Does it have issues? I think that there are arguably some issues. There's a lot of repetition of names, but that's because of the way that she chose to write the dialogue. And I could see that without the kind of map markers in the conversation of a name being used, it could be challenging to follow some of the conversations. So I think she had to use that device because of how she wrote the dialogue. But all in all, The Colony to me was an incredible novel. So happy to see it longlisted. I expect and hope to see it shortlisted. And huge kudos to Audrey McGee. And a little disclaimer, I am speaking as a white male American that has no experience being a part of an exploited people group or a minority. And so, my perspective is what my perspective is, and I can only offer what I got from the book. I don't presume to have any answers to these hard questions or to know how these complicated issues in history and present day and the future should be handled. But I do recognize the novel that I read as something special and something I think that could be also considered important as that conversation is had over the years. So, thanks for listening. I hope you'll go out and read The Colony, and I hope you'll read more books from the Booker Longlist 2022 year. And if you want to check out any of my commercials that I've made to kind of push longlist reading, those are on my channel, all done in the style of Joe Pera, one of my favorite comedians, and just having a little bit of fun bringing all that into the Booker conversation this year. There's more to come. Fall is coming, which means we're going to do a Ray Bradbury fall reading soon. We might do Something Wicked This Way Comes again. We might do The Halloween Tree or The October Country or something else, but stay tuned for news about that. And if you're interested in joining that, keep coming back here for some updates. And then we're also, after Booker's over, hopefully going to dive into East of Eden by John Steinbeck, this wonderful American novel that is widely considered his best work. So excited to jump into that as a community. But stay tuned, and more Booker reviews to come. Thank you.